After the much-anticipated Alaska summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, it looked like Ukraine might be a step closer to peace. Trump's Ukraine envoy Steve Witkoff told CNN on Sunday that Russia had agreed to an Article 5-like security guarantee, something that the Kremlin has long resisted. And Trump himself suggested that the US could play a role in implementing any such guarantees, something that Ukraine has long hoped for. However, the Kremlin has since signaled that they interpreted what was apparently agreed in Alaska rather differently, with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov implying on Thursday that Russia would not accept any meaningful security guarantees, and even casting doubt on Zelensky's political legitimacy. So in this video, we'll explain why there was some post-Alaska optimism, why it's since evaporated, and why the main sticking point seems to be the long-standing issue of Ukraine's security guarantees. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. So, let's start by explaining why the question of security guarantees has long proved such a difficult sticking point. In short, Ukraine sees a security guarantee, i.e. a promise by some third country to intervene on Ukraine's behalf in the event of Russian aggression, as the only way of guaranteeing a sustainable peace. But Russia considers basically any security guarantee for Ukraine to be unacceptable. The Kremlin argue that security guarantees carry escalatory risks, insofar as any third country guaranteeing Ukraine's security might be accidentally dragged into some future war. Well, that's sort of the point, and Ukraine and its allies see Russia's opposition to security guarantees as yet more evidence that Putin wants to take another pop at Ukraine later down the line. This is why Ukraine has been so resistant to any ceasefire. They worry that Russia will just use any pause in fighting to rebuild its forces. And in many ways, this was the root cause of the current conflict. After all, anxieties about Russian aggression were one of the big reasons that Ukraine and other post-Soviet states moved closer to NATO in the 2000s, because NATO's collective defense clause in Article 5 essentially acts as a NATO-wide security guarantee. On the other side, Russia's opposition to NATO membership for Ukraine seems to be at least one of the reasons that Putin launched his full-scale invasion against Ukraine. Anyway, after Russia's first invasion of Ukraine in 2014, and then again after the full-scale invasion in February 2022, Ukraine redoubled its efforts to join NATO. Unfortunately for Ukraine, most NATO members were reluctant to admit a country that was in the middle of a war, and the Trump administration has since ruled it out. In response, Ukraine's European allies offered to provide a non-NATO security guarantee after the war by deploying troops inside Ukraine as part of either a European force or some wider coalition of the willing. The idea behind this was that Putin would be reluctant to attack Ukraine again if there was a risk of non-Ukrainian casualties, which would drag Russia into a wider war with other countries. However, the Kremlin quickly made it clear that they wouldn't accept any troops from any NATO country inside Ukraine, and even Zelensky wasn't convinced, arguing that only an American security guarantee would provide sufficient deterrence. This is one of the reasons that Zelensky pushed so hard to get Trump to sign the so-called minerals deal earlier this year. Even if it didn't look like a great deal for Ukraine economically, Zelensky hoped that a US corporate presence in Ukraine would make Trump more likely to offer some sort of US security guarantee, in order to protect American commercial interests. But Trump again said no, and told Ukraine that the US would not offer security guarantees, suggesting instead that Ukraine should take what it can get from Europe. You get the idea. Ukraine has always insisted on some sort of security guarantee, and ideally an American one. But Russia has always refused even a minimal security guarantee. And well, this is where Steve Witkoff's announcement after the so-called Alaska summit, namely that Putin agreed to a, quote, robust Article 5-like security guarantee, came as so much of a shock. On Monday, Trump then suggested that while the US wouldn't deploy troops in Ukraine, the US could be involved in some sort of post-war security guarantee via air support. Although it's unclear whether he meant fighter jets or other capabilities like airborne intelligence. Somewhat astonishingly, Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent even suggested overcharging Europe for any American weapon systems sent to Ukraine, so that the US could then use the profits to fund any air support, and make the whole thing cost neutral for the American taxpayer. Anyway, this is why at least some people thought that a peace deal might be on the cards early this week. Putin had apparently finally agreed to security guarantees, and there was some speculation that Trump would leverage the possibility of US involvement to get Zelensky to accept some sort of quote-unquote land swap, which would reportedly involve Ukraine giving up all of Donetsk and Luhansk, something that Zelensky has repeatedly ruled out. Trump even claimed that he was on the cusp of arranging an unprecedented trilateral between himself, Putin, and Zelensky. Unfortunately for Trump, it already looks like his peace deal is falling apart though. For starters, there are still internal divisions in Europe on the issue of sending in troops. The UK, Belgium, Lithuania, and Estonia are all prepared to send troops to Ukraine, while Germany and Poland have already ruled it out. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has also expressed wariness, arguing that it would be wiser to offer Ukraine a defence pact rather than deploying troops straight away. But the main reason that Trump's peace plan looks like it's falling apart is Russia. Contrary to what Witkoff and Trump suggested after the Alaska summit, Putin has made it clear that he has no intention of allowing Ukraine meaningful security guarantees. On Thursday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Russia would never accept Western troops being deployed in Ukraine as part of a peacekeeping force, arguing that it would amount to foreign intervention. Lavrov also said that Russia would only accept the security guarantees, quote, agreed in April 2022, referencing a proposal made by the Kremlin during Istanbul peace talks that would have given Russia a veto over the implementation of any security guarantees. Obviously, giving Russia a veto over a security guarantee intended to guard against Russian aggression would render it essentially redundant. Lavrov also poured cold water on the idea of a Trump-Putin-Zelensky trilateral, insisting on Tuesday that any summit would have to be prepared, quote, step by step, gradually, before then implying, as the Kremlin has done in the past, that Zelensky is not a legitimate president. You get the point. Despite Trump's post-Alaska optimism, it doesn't look like Russia has any real interest in making peace or any meaningful concessions at the moment. So what happens next? Well, as always, much depends on Trump, who's already expressed some irritation at Russia's apparent U-turn and apparently threatened to provide Ukraine with more offensive weaponry. The big question here is whether Trump actually follows through on these threats, or whether Putin can once again talk him out of it. It's safe to say that if you're interested in topics such as these, then you're also really passionate about challenging yourself through online learning. While we're here to help you with that, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, are experts at pushing your learning to the next level. That's because Brilliant is an incredibly thorough learning platform, designed to be uniquely effective in how you build skills every day. Their vast library of topics, from science to AI, all feature a perfect mix of engaging problems, competitive features, and daily encouragement that keeps you motivated and on track. And Brilliant helps you to build your critical thinking skills through problem solving, not just memorizing. So while you're building real knowledge on specific topics, you're also becoming a better thinker. For example, if you're looking to build your mathematical intuition, Brilliant is the best place to go. Their newly updated maths course focuses on the most useful, applicable maths concepts, so you never feel like you're wasting your time. You'll start at the perfect level and work your way up through interactive challenges that bring abstract concepts to life. Whether at home or on the go, you can level up your math skills wherever you are. To start your learning journey and try Brilliant for free, visit brilliant.org/TLDR, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description. By doing so, you'll get 20% off an annual premium subscription, and they'll know that you came from us, which really helps us out.